Before we talk about how the CIA targeted you, I know I'm asking questions that are hard to answer, but why the silence?
Well, it was such a huge scandal.
So what happened to you? So you're back at the CIA. You've just been responsible for exposing the CIA. I'm sure loyalty plays a big role in the organization.
You have a loyalty to your country, but you fear the CIA. That's the kind of fear that rules the CIA and CIA whistleblowers. And that's why you don't see many CIA whistleblowers come forth, not only of being sent to prison for violating their secrecy agreement, but also the financial destruction of them and their family. So there's this secret base in the middle of nowhere. They command me to move on the base as second in command and move my family with me into a house on this base. It all seemed fine and good. It was a remote location in the middle of nowhere. Well, within 3 months, my wife started bleeding from her gums. My son, his immune system, he started having severe asthma attacks. His throat was swelling up. I had to take him to the ER. They had almost killed my family.
So because you found a vulnerability in the CIA that put the lives of covert officers in danger, and you've tried to bring attention to that vulnerability to save the lives of other officers, potentially. After that happened, they put a target on your back, and they essentially tried to kill you and your family.
Yes.
Kevin, absolute pleasure to speak to you, sir. And it's going to be a pretty fascinating conversation. I was going through your story before we talk about current events, get your analysis of all the unanswered questions that we're seeing today. Your story is very fascinating of how you joined the CIA, but more importantly, what I really want to focus on is your experiences at the CIA, at least the things you can talk about that are not classified. Because some of it is just hard to believe, especially when you're sending out that, you did an investigation, you were sending out to the head of the CIA, I think it was, and they kept trying to block that information from him. And you had to go there, hand it in person to him, and afterwards what happened, and then you were sent to a post and put in a house that was laced with chemicals. It's just an insane story, Kevin. So before we talk about all the different issues going on today, from Charlie Kirk's assassination to the Epstein files, I'd love to hear your story again.
Yeah, well, it is an insane story. And if you look at my background and some of my previous writings, and of course, I published my credentials, so to prove who I say I am. So I was a top-level CIA officer. I was on the staff of William Casey on the 7th floor during Iran-Contra. And my career was going very well. I was a top performer until I stumbled across a vulnerability in embassies. And you know the story. Much of it's in Twilight of the Shadow Government, where the CIA was allowing a vulnerability in every embassy for anyone to go in through the unclassified visa section into the computer system and identify our covert agents, and by extension, the assets that they'd recruited, which was potentially serious. So my attempts to get the investigation to the CIA, my document was destroyed 3 times. The office claimed it didn't receive it 3 times. It was erased from the headquarters server. And for some reason, the CIA did not want not only this story to come out, but to do anything about it. So simply by providence, someone leaked my investigation to a senior Department of State Inspector General. They took a look at it, and I got a call on the secure line saying, "Hey, listen, someone gave us your report here outside the CIA, and we think there's something potentially serious here. Would you come over and brief us on what you have?" So I went over to Main State to the IG, to the senior IG guys, and briefed them on my report and what it appeared to me was a serious vulnerability. And of course, they were puzzled. Why hasn't the CIA done anything about this? And I said, well, they have not just done anything. They called me on the phone and threatened my career, destroyed my documents, feigned not receiving the document when I sent it to the top officials. And so I have no idea why they're doing this. So they said, okay, Kev, go back, keep your head low, and let's look at this. And a couple of days later, I get a call on the secure line. And this was a very senior level government employee. Obviously, I don't want to mention his name, but we'll call him Jim. Jim said, listen, we've all met here. We looked at your report. We think that something potentially serious could be here. we're going to do a global investigation into the embassies, several around the world, and see if we can do this. Go in and identify the CIA's covert personnel. Keep your head low. Do not tell the CIA we're doing this. Do not tell anyone, including your supervisor, we're doing this. You will probably get a call from us within about 3 months. It's going to take at least that for us to investigate this. And I said, yes, sir. Over to you on this one. So something very sinister was happening. And of course, this is my career. I'd been there 17 years. So I went back to busily doing my job. And sure enough, 3 months later,
still at the CIA. You were still working at the CIA at the time. So they've threatened your job. They've kind of put your file aside. They've wiped it out of their servers, your investigation into that vulnerability. But you kept working at the CIA, and then someone leaked that report that you had to the Senior Inspector General for the Department of State.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And the state IG went out and did an international investigation, taking my report, going into the visa section to the unclassified computers where any foreign intelligence service could gain access, or terrorist organization for that matter. And using my information, attempted a penetration to go in through those unclassified computers and identify our covert CIA personnel. And they were successful. 3 months later, I get a call on the secure line from Department of State IG, and Jim said, Kevin, we finished our investigation. It's not just as bad as you thought. It is worse. Please report to Maine State this Friday for a meeting. I said, yes, sir. I'll be there. Now, at this point, I had no idea if the CIA knew about it or not. Well, it turns out they didn't. So I went over to Maine State, up to the top floor there. They buzzed me in, shook hands with the two IG guys, and Jim, who I had known previously. He was a high-level former agency officer, so he knew the system. And they invited me into a long conference room with a long walnut conference table, and they said, okay, have a seat here. We're expecting a visitor. I said, yes, sir. And I sat down at mid-table. The door buzzes. They opened the door and let in a senior GS-15 CIA officer, the one in charge of supposedly protecting the cover of our agents. Brought him in, took him to the very end of the conference room table at the back wall, sat him down. First time I had, at this point, the CIA didn't know what had happened. Department of State, the senior officer stood up and said, you know why you're here? He goes, I have no idea why I'm here. What's going on? He said, officially consider this a rebuke from Department of State Inspector General to you, the CIA, for putting the lives of your agents at risk and covering it up for over 10 years. This is an official rebuke. This report and the results of this report are going into a report that will go to every agency in the intelligence community to see what you, the CIA, have done. Well, the officer, obviously, the blood drained from his face. He didn't say a word. He just sat there shocked. And then the IG said, you can go now. So he got up, walked by, didn't even look me in the eye, walked by me, walked out the door. And I sat there realizing that essentially I had just placed a target on my back from senior CIA management. It was a complete embarrassment to the entire intelligence community. The IG guys, who of course were consummate professionals, and Jim thanked me for the work I'd done and appreciated, told me that the report would go out within 2 weeks, which it did. And I left, and that was that. I went back to CIA headquarters, and I knew it was just a matter of time. They were going to come out.
This is where it gets very sinister. I think your story gets a lot more sinister. Before that, the head of the CIA that was there, he knew about, you've shown him that report previously? He knew about that vulnerability?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It went all the way to the top of the CIA. Yep. These sorts of
why?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
These sorts of decisions don't just come down, from the division level. These decisions like this come down from the director of the CIA.
Why do you think they tried to keep it hush-hush? Why didn't they address that vulnerability? Because it's putting the covert CIA officers' lives in danger, including yourself. You were a covert CIA officer at one stage as well.
Right. Right. And in my mind, I was protecting my fellow officers and their lives. Essentially, we all asked that question. The IG asked that question. Of course, I did. My attorneys, when I finally came out in the open and blew the whistle and filed suit against the CIA, my attorneys were like, why didn't they just fix this? Why did they want this there? Now, when you get to know the CIA, especially if you read Twilight of the Shadow Government, you understand that there are programs within the CIA that not even the director of the CIA knows about. Now, in this case, he did, but generally speaking, the CIA is a rogue organization. So for some reason, it wanted that vulnerability in there. If it wanted to take out a rogue agent, a station chief, and have plausible deniability for an assassination or that of some assets rolled up, they could use that. It's the only conclusion that made any sense that I could reach. But we never found out the why, because then they went after me with a vengeance and tried to hit me with the state secrets privilege to silence me and my evidence.
Did the CIA respond formally to that report? What did they say? What was their explanation?
Nothing. Silence.
Okay. Who faced consequences? Did the director of the CIA face consequences at the time?
I received nothing, no information from anybody in the CIA. Of course, I didn't receive another communication from the Department of State IG. And I really admired those guys, but someone asked me, well, they just did that and then left you hanging in the agency. And I'm like, yeah, that's what they did. So I never even heard back from them as to what the director of the CIA's response. It was complete silence. And then, of course, things begin to happen within the CIA targeting me personally.
Before we talk about how the CIA targeted you, again, I know I'm asking questions that are hard to answer, but why the silence?
Why this? Well, it was such a huge scandal that the CIA would do this, would allow this opening for people to kill and assassinate our covert agents or even identify their assets. I mean, it could, if it went before Congress, if it ever made it to Congress, and most of these things don't, but if it ever made it to Congress, including select committees, there would have been calls for those that are still honest to shut the CIA down for doing this sort of thing. Now, if you read my book, there are many things the CIA has done they should have been shut down for. But if this would have gone to Congress and the select committees, there would have been calls for reorganization and the shutdown of the CIA, which, of course, I called for in my book. The CIA needs to be reformed without a question. But this information never reached them, I'm certain of that.
So what happened to you? So you're back at the CIA. You've just been responsible for exposing the CIA. I'm sure loyalty plays a big role in the organization. There's a lot of threats made to anyone that breaks that code of honor or loyalty, whatever they call it. What happened to you?
Well, it's funny. We used to call it the paranoia palace, because in the CIA, you have a loyalty to your country, but you fear the CIA. You sign a non-disclosure agreement that basically says if you say anything about any covert operation, for example, if I'm standing next to an agent in the field and then that agent has had too much to drink, gets angry and pulls out his firearm and shoots an asset dead because they were in a fight, I can't say a thing about that. And if I report that back to headquarters, they will cite my secrecy agreement, my non-disclosure agreement, and threaten me with prison if I talk about it with anyone. That's the kind of fear that rules the CIA and CIA whistleblowers. And that's why you don't see many CIA whistleblowers come forth, because of the fear, not only of being sent to prison for violating their secrecy agreement, but also the financial destruction of them and their family.
That doesn't look too good.
No.
I'm trying to guess what's going to happen to you next. And it's parts of the story. So what do they do to you?
Okay. Well, so there's silence on all fronts. Now, I was high enough up in the CIA, including doing espionage investigations, searching for moles and investigating GS-15s who may have been selling secrets to the Soviets and other things. So I know, and I knew the system intimately and how they operate and what they do and how they sneak around and do things. So I knew they were planning something. I didn't know how they were going to do it, but I knew that my days there were numbered. I was a top performer. I was a Category 1 officer, which is the highest category you can achieve. I have several citations and meritorious unit citations and other things. But just resounding silence. And I knew that they were planning something. So I'm informed that I have been assigned to a secret CIA facility out in, I can't say, of course, where it is, because I try to stay, I don't want to give them any thing to use against me. I've been very careful about that in all my interviews. I was a classifying authority, so I know what's classified and what's not. So I can say things and without giving the CIA ammunition to come and try to shut me up again. Anyway, so this was a secret facility out in the Midwest. It had buried all kinds of CIA skeletons they didn't want Congress to know about, and the American people. And if people had found out, once again, the CIA would be under scrutiny by the intelligence communities if they did their job. So there's this secret base in the middle of nowhere, and they command me to move on the base as second in command and move my family with me into a house on this base. It all seemed fine and good. It was a remote location in the middle of nowhere. And as far as I was concerned, okay, I'll sit here for a few years, hopefully. Well, within 3 months, my wife started bleeding from her gums. She had bruises all over her body that looked like someone had taken a baseball bat and beat her all over her body, her arms, her legs, her back. She lost her short-term memory and went into dementia. My son, his immune system, he started having severe asthma attacks. His throat was swelling up. I had to take him to the ER. So I asked the agency to contact headquarters and have them come out and do an environmental study on this house, because this is really poisoning my family. Well, they refused 3 times, ordered me to stay silent about it and not tell anyone in headquarters. Cable traffic that I sent back was deleted from the system, which is illegal. It's a felony, but the CIA doesn't care about felonies. So what I did was I secretly flew my oldest son, Joey, to a nationally recognized immunologist out in the Midwest. He did a full 3-day blood work on Joey and came back and sat me down and said, Mr. Shipp, your son's immune system is virtually destroyed. And I said, well, how? And he said, it's not what it is, but it's similar to being exposed to a burst of radiation. His T cells, his immune cells are shot. The CIA didn't know I was conducting these tests. I flew him back, took him to another immunologist locally near this base. She did some tests, took me aside confidentially and said, Mr. Shipp, your son's immune system is so damaged that I think he may have AIDS. I said, well, he's 16 years old and he hasn't even dated yet. That we know of. A parent never knows. But she said, well, this looks like this could be terminal. So I had to go back and tell Joey. We had to took him out and got him tested for AIDS. And for 2 grueling weeks, he thought he had AIDS and he was going to die. The HIV test came back negative. 2 more doctors issued a diagnosis that he'd been exposed to some kind of poison that had virtually ruined his immune system. And it went on and on from there. Our house was broken into. The security guards, who had become friends of mine because I was supporting them, I was actually in charge of them, confided in me that they were ordered to follow me and my family wherever we went, monitor our movements, and tell the head of the base where we were going, what we were doing. Our house was bugged. It was broken into. I had trapped it. Since I was trained by them, I had trapped the house, and I caught them breaking in the house on tape and with some seals that I placed in there. So they'd broken into the house. I went back to the ceiling where we had found some of this poison on the ceiling, and the only way you can see it is it glows green under UV light. And I had done a lot of research on this, mycotoxins especially, which it's what Saddam Hussein used to poison the troops. It's called yellow rain, and it's been a biochem weapon the CIA has been looking at for years. Anyway, when you hit the ceiling, these mycotoxins would show up iridescent green. That's how I knew what was poisoning our family. We were I essentially told them to evacuate us out of there, or I was going to cause a public nightmare for them. So they evacuated from the house. I trapped the house while we were out. They broke in, broke all my seals, activated the motion voice detector that I had in there. And then you could hear them leave. We went back in the house with my attorney at that time, Clint, who wound up being an unsung hero, took my black light back into where we found the mycotoxins, and they didn't know I had a black light. When I hit the ceiling with the black light, there were big strokes of some chemical that they had painted over the mycotoxins, making them, I guess, unable to be tested or something. But now their chemical showed up. So I knew this was getting bad. That's when I had enough. As the old saying goes, you can mess with a man, but you don't mess with his family. My wife and kids were virtually terminally ill. And it went from there. I blew the whistle and came out, went back to headquarters, and of course was bugged, followed. My phones were bugged. I went in and became a polygraph examiner, and they were constantly looking at me through the 2-way mirrors, and it just got ridiculous. But at that point, they had almost killed my family. So it didn't matter to me what they were doing. I was going to expose what they did, and regardless of what they did to me.
So because you've released, you found a vulnerability in the CIA that put the lives of covert officers in danger, and you've tried to bring attention to that vulnerability to save the lives of other officers, potentially. After that happened, they put a target on your back and they essentially tried to kill you and your family.
Yes. And in my books and my talks, I want people to understand what a dark criminal organization the CIA is. Now, I was 100% loyal. I was rising to the top until I saw this and what they were doing, and found out from one of the IG staffers who felt guilty that the director of the CIA, George Tenet, had ordered the CIA IG to target me and silence me at all costs. And that came right out of the mouth of one of the investigators. So the CIA is a dark criminal organization. The operational part. And I want to make it clear that there's a big part of the CIA, probably 80% of the employees down there doing the logistics and the travel and everything else are good patriotic Americans that are just serving their country. It's the 20% up at the top on the operational side that are engaging in criminal activity. Most of the time, Congress is not aware of their funding programs by running drugs and things like that. And sometimes, as Mike Pompeo and James Woolsey, two former DCIs, said that the CIA was doing things that they, as the director of the CIA, didn't even know the CIA was doing. So people need to understand we're dealing with a dark, criminal, evil organization that has no constraints on it by Congress. They don't know what they're doing, and I don't think Congress wants to know because it would risk their careers also. So this monster is just allowed to continue doing what it's doing.
Wow. How's your family now?
My son has disappeared. He was diagnosed with clinical PTSD and basically lost his job. Thought he was still going to die because his immune system was still destroyed. And as of this program, we don't know where he is.
I'm sorry to hear. And your wife?
We were divorced. Let's see, that was back in 2008. She couldn't take it anymore, and I don't blame her. No woman should have ever gone through what she went through. It just, of course, destroyed and ruined our marriage, ruined our finances. And I have the CIA on tape admitting that they intentionally denied us hardship loans and increased the interest on our car loans and everything else. And she just collapsed, and our marriage did too. We're on good terms now, of course. She still hasn't recovered. You can't even bring the subject up to her without her going into a relapse herself. So she's doing okay. She's not made whole by any stretch of the imagination. So it affected our family, not just physically, but also mentally, especially my oldest son and my wife and my youngest daughter, Carly, and our son, Bobby, were having nightmares of men in black breaking in and stealing all their toys, which they did. They contaminated everything so bad, they had to take our kids' toys out and burn them and incinerate them. So you could imagine a family going through that sort of thing. And people wonder why I put myself out there like this at risk. Well, that's why my family was the most important thing in my life, still is. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing until finally someone in Congress, maybe Thomas Massey or someone, starts holding church committee hearings again on the CIA and opening some of this up for the American people to see.
What's really sad to hear is that you've worked for 17 years, as far as I understand, at the CIA. And not just easy work. You worked in counterterrorism and counterespionage, really difficult, going undercover.
Yeah.
You've had to do the dirty work for many years.
Yeah. I went on one-way assignments where we took out life insurance. I was an assistant team leader for, well, they won't let me say exactly what it was, but an anti-terrorism assault team. We were a team sent in to neutralize a terrorist organization that was massacring entire police departments. And we were told that we may not be coming back. And I did several assignments like that for God and country. I was glad to do it. I had no idea then what the CIA is on that side, on the operational side of things, until, of course, I saw it for myself. And I want the American people to know what it is. And this is a constitutional government. Well,
I've spoken to John Kiriakou, former CIA officer, but I've also spoken to Mike Benz, who really loves to expose any of these big organizations, whether it's USAID, the CIA, the FBI, etc. And he does a great job. I'd love to connect you to Mike Benz. He does a great job at doing it. That's all he does.
Those are real heroes. Yeah.
The intent. So what Mike talks about, he talks about all the different things that the CIA, the FBI have done around the world, but he also says, they cross the lines. They do things that are illegal and unethical, but their intention is to protect the United States of America. That is in most cases. But what's happened is that, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right. Is that they got so much power where the objective, while still the end goal is to protect the United States, it's also to maintain power and do things that might not be at the interest of the United States. But I'd love to get your thoughts on, I don't look at the CIA, this evil organization. Obviously, I'm not in your position. If I was in your position, I'd probably see them as the devil. But I also see them as a very corrupt and an organization that has no checks and balances. No one holds them accountable for what they do.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's why I've come out publicly, because they have no accountability. I think your friend is accurate too, in that the CIA, starting with the OSS and then the National Security Act of 1947 with Harry Truman, the CIA was created for a good reason, to protect the United States and provide policymakers with important intelligence information to make decisions. That is what the intent was. Within 2 years of the CIA's formation, Harry Truman came out in an op-ed in the Washington Post, and I have a copy of this. It's in both my books. And he said that he regrets forming the CIA. It's now casting a shadow on our historic position of freedom in the country. And he regretted even creating it. It had gone rogue within 2 years of its creation. Now, here we are in 2025. It is a juggernaut now. And there is no accountability. They own the system of secrecy. And I mean own it. They manipulate Congress. They manipulate the president. They manipulate elections. And I prove this in some of my speeches. They manipulate the judiciary with the FISA warrants and the state secrets privilege. They have control over our elected government. So there's two governments. There's our constitutional government, the one that we all swore an oath to uphold. And then there's the secret government, and that's the CIA and its massive power of secrecy. And this upwards of $21 trillion that's going into this black budget, black hole that not even Congress can get accountability over. The Department of Defense and the CIA will not let anybody audit its books and where this money is going. So we have two governments, essentially.
And which one has more power, in your opinion?
The black government.
Right. And when did that start? When do you think that black government started getting more power than the elected government?
Well, you can take it all the way back to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the CIA, along with the mafia. And I've done programs on this. And Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he encouraged me to write my last book, the CIA involvement in the assassination of JFK and RFK. And there is evidence to justify that. That is not just a theory. I think you could prove that in a court of law today. So going all the way back, it had already gone rogue. Now, think about it. In several decades, it has just increased its power of secrecy. It has increased its black budget. Congress has done nothing. The Senate Select Committee, the Senate Select and House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence are show dressing. They don't investigate the CIA. They don't go past what the CIA gives it. They know that if they do, like Frank Church and Otis Pitt, who did the Church Committee, they'd both be destroyed politically, which both of them were. So the select committees are they're a show. There's even a book about that written by a scholar on how the select committees are just a window dressing. So they're absolutely out of control. In my book, I give 10 steps to reform the CIA. I've done several tweets and hats off to Bobby Kennedy Jr., who pressured X to let me leave my posts up, because I'm exposing this stuff daily on my X account. But this thing it has to go before a true Senate committee, just like the Church Committee, to open the CIA up to the criminal activities that it has done and is still doing. The CIA left its protection of national security 50 years, well, let's say accurately, about 45 years ago. Now the CIA is all about expanding its global power and control and maintaining its self-existence at all costs. That's what the CIA is now, and that's why it needs to be reformed and restructured back. Take this evil power of secrecy away from her. Let's put criminals, probably a better word, criminal power of secrecy away. Restructure the CIA back into an intelligence collection agency that Truman intended. That's what I am calling for. And Bobby Kennedy Jr. and others have also That doesn't mean we do away with intelligence. That doesn't mean we do away with what the CIA was supposed to be. No, we keep that and we embellish that and we build that. We just take the dark side of the CIA, the National Clandestine Service, away from the CIA, give it to the Defense Intelligence Agency or someone that's not going to criminalize it, and restructure that. And then we're back to what Truman intended.
And do you see a lot of collaboration between the CIA and other organizations within the government, other unelected organizations? You've got the FBI, you've got the Department of Defense, or other intelligence, foreign intelligence services, or they're all independent. How much overlap is there? How much cooperation?
There's a lot of overlap. Between the CIA and the FBI, especially when I was a counterintelligence investigator. We were searching for moles. We were co-located with FBI counterintelligence. So FBI counterintelligence, CIA counterintelligence are essentially one and the same. And with certain things, for example, everybody's crying for evidence in the Epstein case. Well, I'm convinced Epstein was an intelligence asset, and since he was, those files will never see the light of day because they're probably hidden under secrecy in the CIA and or Mossad. So it's a system that has morphed itself into almost bulletproof in terms of oversight.
Yeah, I'm getting my agenda for the Epstein interviews I did, because that's probably the longest agenda I've ever done for an interview. That's just about Epstein. One of the craziest stories I've ever researched. Ongoing, keep going down. It's just an insane story, and that's the question I asked. Now, I interviewed Marjorie Taylor Greene. I interviewed
good for her.
Ro Khanna. I interviewed him today and a few weeks ago about the Epstein story. And my question to them is, they're trying to get the files, Epstein files, to be released. And where they're very close to getting enough votes for that. But my question is, will they really how do we know that these files are legitimate, are authentic? If the CIA has all these different capabilities, can't they go into the service and just edit the files, change bits and pieces? Or it's not as easy as people make it out to be? That was my question to them. They couldn't answer it, to be honest.
No, do you think that you can go into the CIA and demand top secret files on one of their biggest assets in history, Jeffrey Epstein, and the CIA is just going to turn that information over or even acknowledge that it exists? Of course not. People will never see the full files on Epstein. They may get close to finding out who some of the clientele was, and they have found so far that there were 4,700 Epstein transactions in the Department of Treasury to the tune of $1.5 billion, and that's just the beginning of the audit trail. So no, if these files are held by intelligence, Congress is not going to see them. Even the FBI can't crack into the CIA secrecy code. They can in some cases if the CIA decides that they want to use them. But I think a lot of the FBI doesn't even have access to some of these intelligence files. And that's why I don't think people are ever going to see them unless there's some kind of dramatic reform. And I don't expect that anytime soon.
Yeah, and we're talking about Epstein. You were at the CIA during the whole Iran-Contra operation, and that's really when Epstein started getting involved with the intelligence, with all these different individuals. And especially for people listening that don't understand what Iran-Contra is, to oversimplify it for them, I'll let you to kind of expand on it. But essentially, the CIA was supplying Iran, an enemy of the US, with weapons through covert operations. And people, I can't remember Moshagi, the Saudi gentleman that was I'm sure you know his name, that was smuggling the weapons. Epstein was involved in managing his finances, and he was one of many. That's when Epstein really got involved. And this is no secret. Like, these are, there's a lot of facts to show for this. We're not talking about a conspiracy, maybe this, maybe that. We're literally talking about facts. We've got the Prime Minister of Israel, two Prime Ministers of Israel that visited Epstein, one of them on multiple
32 times.
32 times. So I think the indications, and I honestly, if anyone doesn't believe that Epstein had intelligence links, you can question a lot of theories because it's hard to prove them. This one is not, it's going to take an hour just to go through all the evidence, but it's not difficult to prove that he had some sort of links. Doesn't have to be, part of Mossad or part of the CIA or part of Saudi intelligence, but at least collaborating with them or being an asset of theirs. But I want to get your thoughts on how deep it goes. Like, what in your opinion, based on what you've seen so far in your experience on how these covert operations work, what would be in the Epstein files? Because some people are kind of the most extreme scenarios that are kind of plausible is that it was a honeypot operation, essentially getting all these influential, powerful people to come in and trick them to sleeping with women that seem young, but they don't know these women are below 18. Maybe they do, maybe they do not. Film them in the act and now blackmail them afterwards. It's just an entire blackmail operation. Would love to get your thoughts on it.
Well, yeah, well, it was the quintessential blackmail operation, no question about it. There are politicians, there are CEOs of companies that were involved in this and that are being blackmailed. It is horrendous the level that this happened at. Now, if you were the CIA and or Mossad, but let's focus on the CIA, and I'll explain why there's obvious evidence that the CIA was involved, and you had an international global financial syndicate manager, Jeffrey Epstein, that had contacts all over the world with senior officials and in business and in government. Would you not want to recruit that guy? Now, I think he was already recruited at that point, going back to Iran-Contra, which he was involved in the finances. But would you not jump right on that and the opportunity to blackmail politicians, foreign officials, and corporate CEOs into doing what you want them to do, or to keep their mouth shut when you're running drugs, which the CIA has done, or running arms, which the CIA has done and is doing? Would you not do that? Now, remember, the CIA has no morals whatsoever. It's a black hole in terms of ethics. So, yes, they would do it. And if you remember, in Epstein's first trial, where he got off and the witnesses were silenced, the Attorney General Acosta at the time was said, why did you let him go? Why didn't you convict him and put him in prison? And his response was, and anybody can find this, like you're saying, it's right out there. He said, I was told by the higher ups that Epstein was intelligence and to leave it alone, unquote. And subsequent to that, Acosta was promoted to the Secretary of Labor. And the head of the prison where Epstein, in my view, was murdered, wasn't chastised for the worst security of prisoner in history. He was promoted to a regional director of prisons. So it was a huge blackmail operation. And that's nothing new with the government. You remember Roy Cohn, and you remember J. Edgar Hoover, and one of the billionaires at the time, Louis Rosenstiel. They ran blackmail operations, and remember that name, Roy Cohn. Everybody just researched that name. They ran sexual blackmail operations, Herbert Hoover included, against political opponents in the United States government. All three of those, and Roy Cohn especially factors in to Jeffrey Epstein and the same kind of blackmail network, sex blackmail network that Rosenstiel, Herbert Hoover, and Roy Cohn were involved in. So it's just a continuation of the same.
Yeah, going as high as Attorney General Barr, ruling it suicide.
No, yeah.
Even
Barr's
before the autopsy.
Barr is a longtime CIA asset. Yep.
His father was in the CIA before even the CIA was called CIA, and he was the head of I think he's a dean of a school.
Yeah.
And the father of Attorney General William Barr was the first person to hire Jeffrey Epstein.
William Barr was recruited by the CIA right out of college, and had a years-long relationship with the CIA. That I don't know if Trump knew that, but people can once again go out and research that. William Barr was a longtime CIA asset, actually working for the CIA.
So. But if someone like President Trump or any president would like to drain the swamp, would like to, for example, the Epstein saga is causing him a lot of damage to his voter base. We've seen a split within MAGA that is ongoing to this day. If the Epstein files are released, we'll see where that leads to and what we end up seeing. But explain to me how the president of the United States, the leader of the country, is not able to get to the bottom of things like this, like release the Epstein files, be able to have access to any classified information at the CIA. Can't he appoint a director of the CIA that will just give him, John Ratcliffe, giving him all the information that he needs? I'm struggling to understand how the leader of the country is not able to stand up to the CIA. How are they able to achieve that? What do they do?
Well, I'll say this from an analytical point of view. I voted for Trump in the last election. Trump does not want those files out. I think that's clear from his statements and the constant blockage of even the mention of Jeffrey Epstein in any investigation. The reduction of Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence down to Club Med, a lower, more cushy prison, and all these other distractions away from the Epstein investigation to try to stop it. I cannot see anything other than complicity there. Recently, Trump was asked by a reporter, are you going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, or what are you going to do about that? And his response was, who? Oh, Ghislaine Maxwell? I haven't really thought about that in a long time. excuse me, one of the biggest cases in U.S. history. That is simply not true. So there's too many untruths. There's too many obfuscations. There's too many blockages of the Epstein investigation, to the point where Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Thomas Massie, of whom I have great respect, are having to push this and push Congress to do something about one of the biggest blackmail operations in U.S. history, and yet they're being stonewalled on every side. As an analyst, that shows me that it is intentional. That's just my opinion.
But why? I just cannot imagine Trump being involved in that sex ring, underage sex ring in any way. It just doesn't click for me. I could be wrong. But then my question is,
there's no evidence that Donald Trump was involved in child trafficking, and I don't think he was. The evidence is there that there were major politicians and businessmen, I'm not saying he was or was not one of them, that were blackmailed, that he either knows about, is close to, helped him in. And this is just conjecture. I'm not saying this is the case, but just based on an analytical view, trying to figure out the why. He was not involved in child trafficking, but people who were blackmailed in this Epstein operation were people in high places. And the only motivation, if you're going to look, I did criminal investigations. I taught at university. You look at the motive, you look at the opportunity and the method. What would be the motive for Trump not want to split this thing wide open and bust open the biggest blackmail industry in American history? Why wouldn't he do that? That is the question. And the answer to that, we don't know right now, but it's a question that has not been answered.
What would happen if the president of the United States, Trump or otherwise, doesn't matter who, came and decided to shut down the CIA as a whole, as an organization? Do you think they could succeed? And what would the CIA do to try to prevent them from doing that?
Trump will never do that. I had high hopes that he would. I want everybody to critically think about this, because when a red herring is thrown out there to try to appease everybody, they need to look carefully at that. For example, when Ratcliffe, who by all accounts is a good man, when Ratcliffe got in, the first thing they did is that they were cleaning out the CIA, and they fired 1,200 employees, and were starting to reform the CIA, and then it stopped. They fired 1,200 useless employees who were involved in DEI or something, and then that's where the scrutiny stopped. I wish Donald Trump would demand a church committee and reform of the CIA. I do not think that will happen because the CIA is just too powerful and has too much control over the Congress and the Senate. And for Trump to do that would mean essentially his end. So, just my
his end as a president.
The end of his presidency, his life. Yeah, it would put him in serious danger. So, do I think he's going to do it? No, I do not. Sadly, I had high hopes when he went in there. I no longer think that's going to happen.
The more I dig into this, Kevin, it's something you know obviously significantly more than I. The more I understand where all these theories are coming from. Pointing the finger at the CIA for some of the most notable assassinations in U.S. history. And when I start looking at things like Project MKUltra, I'm like, what? Like this actually happened? This is a fact? Like, how far does it go? Is it ongoing? A lot of people don't understand what Project MKUltra is. Can you just explain to people listening now, what was that project? How did it even start about? And how far did they take it? I know there's a gentleman, he spent his entire life, I think his name is Bob O'Neill, I think if I'm right. Did a whole book on
book.
Exactly. Chaos, I think it was called, and MKUltra's influence on even the Charles Manson murders and the political benefits, the political reasons that they might have they were trying to seek by these horrific murders.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Can you just explain it to the audience to understand what we're talking about and how deep these operations go? Because when you say the CIA doesn't have ethics, there's a reason you're saying this, and this is one of the many reasons.
Sure. And hats off to Tom O'Neill. He did what Congress should have done and didn't. And I would recommend his book, Chaos, to everyone, because he really dug up some significant information on MKUltra, the CIA's involvement, Jolly West Lewis, and the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, and where MKUltra was being conducted with and on students, and Manson and his family were attendees there. the guy's not going to get a Nobel Peace Prize because they'll make sure that's silenced, but he should. Because it's a magnificent piece of work. MKUltra was one of those dark programs in the CIA, highly classified, compartmented programs, where they were using drugs, LSD, mescaline, and other things, initially to try to see if they could interrogate people and get them to talk, despite mental resistance. First of all. Second of all, they were trying to create super soldiers who could go in and assassinate somebody, and then when they got back, they wouldn't remember a thing that they did. I would segue there to Sirhan. Bobby Kennedy Jr. and I both agree. Sirhan was an MKUltra subject. I think I'm convinced of that. But anyway, created a super soldier who
that's the shooter of Bobby Kennedy.
Yes, that was the so-called killer of Bobby Kennedy, and it wasn't Sirhan's shot that killed Robert Kennedy. He did shoot, but it wasn't a kill shot from behind in the head. Anyway. But Sirhan doesn't remember a thing about that incident, and he's been questioned over and over. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has gone in there personally and come out and said, no, he didn't do it. Psychiatrists have gone in there and had him climbing his cell, acting like a monkey. He was so easily programmable. But there's an example. So MKUltra that was the purpose of it, and they were drugging people without their knowledge with LSD. Frank Olson being one of the most famous, they were drugging him with LSD without his knowledge. And he snapped and jumped out of from the highest floor of a hotel, committed suicide. That was the only thing that got any attention at that time about MKUltra was Frank Olson's so-called suicide, which his family to this day said did not happen. So the church committee opens up and actually uncovers the fact that there was an MKUltra program, that it did exist. They got a few documents indicating that the CIA was involved in these things, and then, as the CIA does, as they did with the torture, not just waterboarding, the bad torture, the CIA, Richard Helms, the director, destroyed 10,000 MKUltra documents immediately, so they would never see the light of day. It's like CIA Director Gina Haspel destroyed all of the bad torture tapes and told, under subpoena, the Senate that, well, she couldn't produce them because they'd been destroyed. So that was MKUltra. Now, they claimed, the CIA did, after they destroyed all the documents, that MKUltra no longer exists. But they've given us no proof that it no longer exists, and they've given us no definitive proof that it was stopped. And the CIA has a bunch of ways to do mind control and manipulate people's minds. And the technology there is stunning in ways that they can neurologically affect the human brain with certain electronic signals. So it very well could exist today. I know people. I know a lady who counsels a psychologist who was the daughter of the legal counsel to Richard Helms, and he quit because of MKUltra. He witnessed it personally. I interviewed his daughter, who has been counseling MKUltra subjects, and she says, no, this happened. Some of these people are still alive. So once again, in this world of secrecy, we can't get our hands on any evidence that it was ever stopped or that it is ever continuing. Now, I can tell you this. My son Joey was a healthy, smart, young kid at 16 years old who was going to college. He was talented. He wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps. And then one day he just snapped, was diagnosed with clinical PTSD. Right now, he's disappeared. We don't know where he is. If you want a human evidence of this kind of thing, well, there you have it. So do they continue to do it today? Well, if it works and it benefits the CIA, yes, they would. Of course they would. They'll do anything if they think that they're going to get intelligence out of it, or if they're going to get some way to advance the CIA's power out of it, or some asset in a foreign power out of it, or to shut somebody up in the U.S. government. They will do it.
So Frank Olson's stories, obviously many people now just might not know about it. So this is one example of someone that was, that had microdoses of LSD and ended up committing suicide. And why? Was he just seen as a liability or as a threat by the CIA? And that's why they did what they did?
Yeah, he'd come out and said that this was immoral. He didn't want to be a part of this previous to his death.
Of MKUltra?
Yes.
He was part of MK. He was part of that program.
Yes.
And then they ended up using that program to.
And he started complaining about it. Now, I'm not saying the CIA killed him. These are just the facts. He started being disgruntled, and then wound up committing suicide some months later. That's just the facts. The CIA kill him? Would the CIA do? Of course they would. Suicide is one of their favorite types of murder. In my opinion, look at Jeffrey Epstein. Suicide is a very
in plain sight. In plain sight, like Jeffrey Epstein is just mental.
It's an assassination.
Yeah,
and they label it suicide, and they get away with it.
The gaslighting is insane. It's not like it was done in a very meticulous way. The footage was tampered with. The footage was kept secret.
Yeah.
The guards were just distracted and kept private, confidential afterwards. The head of the guards, I think, was I think given a promotion. When people like Marjorie Taylor Greene just a few days ago said, "I will not commit suicide," she was talking about, "I'm not suicidal."
Yeah.
That's scary.
Now, and it helps to understand they can either suicide someone or they can drive them to it. Like Gary Webb, when he wrote Dark Alliance on CIA drug running, they drove him to kill himself, which is their preferred way of assassination. So they can either kill somebody and make it look like a suicide, and I think in Epstein's case, or they can drive the person to the point where they can't take the financial destruction or anything else anymore, and they just have to end it. But it's their favorite way of doing things. It's like the mafia. Very little evidence when a person allegedly does it to themselves.
I'm going to ask some selfish questions here. So one thing I'm thinking about, especially after the Charlie Kirk assassination, and not because of the CIA, I have no worries to be concerned about the CIA, at least not yet. But just, CIA is just only one form of intelligence. You got Russian intelligence, Chinese intelligence. I'm sure they're doing things potentially even worse than the US. The Mossad, etc., Saudi intelligence, list goes on. Yeah. It's like if you piss off any organization that's powerful, especially an intelligence organization, you should be careful. And I'm thinking, my spare time, and funny enough, I was actually speaking to my team about security. I live in Dubai. I'm originally from Australia, and I was talking to my team about security, like how safe is Dubai, and we're having that back and forth. That was the same day. Then I went and did an interview, and then as I was doing that interview, Charlie Kirk was shot. I finished the interview, and, getting calls from the team. And then we started having a conversation. It's like, for people like myself, and, I spoke to Patrick Bet-David a few days afterwards, and he was apparently the CIA, the FBI called him and they said to him, "Hey, you're on a kill list." Piers Morgan gets death threats all the time. I interviewed him right after the assassination. And they're all taking security a lot more seriously. As a former CIA officer, and you've worked in counter-espionage and you've had some high-level positions, what could people do to be safe? Like, for example, Candace Owens did a video. She's released what she called, I think, kill switch, where if she's killed, there's people that she's entrusted with a lot of information that will release that information.
Good.
Is that a good strategy? Number one.
Absolutely do that. Yes.
Okay. Number two. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Number two is having security. I have security, but I literally look at them as worthless. I think if you want to be killed, security won't be able to do much at all. If anything, that could become a liability because you could corrupt those security men. So I'm guessing having security men around you is pretty useless when presidents and world leaders get killed. Yeah. Okay, great. Another one is having cameras film me 24/7. I have nothing to hide. I don't really care if people film me. If they get me naked on camera, I'm like, this is the worst thing. If it leaks, it leaks. I don't care. But I'm like, if something happens to me, at least it's going to be on camera. And I think most people that get killed, it's like the cameras are off, or there is no cameras when they've been killed. Yep. Or there's like a blind spot. So would you say this is a good strategy to always have a camera being filmed at all times? You lose your privacy, but then it makes it harder to covertly kill you. Is that fair? Or
yeah, that's what I do. And that's what I've been doing since I came out and blew the whistle. You notice I do everything publicly, everything in the open, everything in public. People ask me all the time, "Aren't you afraid of being assassinated?" I'm like, too late. Twilight of the Shadow Government's been written. The cat's out of the bag. Whatever. We're all going to go. I guess going fast is not a bad way. But anyway, film yourself all the time. Make everything you do public. Every threat you get, make that public. Make it public to everybody. What has kept me safe is constantly recording my movements, where I am, what I'm doing. I have a counter surveillance net around me, which I won't go into, of other people watching too, which you should have. I'm writing a book right now for Skyhorse on surveillance, counter surveillance, and some measures people can take that I used in the field. And it's not going to be out probably till January, February, probably February. Anyway, I'm writing something like that for this very reason. But 1, have a kill switch. 2, record everything you do. 3, have a counter surveillance network of yourself and people around you that people don't know are there or are doing that. Friends, relatives, neighbors, people that you can trust. And I have that will spot somebody before they even get into your inner ring. Security is good, for the thugs and the wackos and the crazy who try to get in and take you out, but it's not going to stop an intelligence organization like Mossad, Saudi intelligence, or the CIA. It's not going to stop that. What's going to stop them is publicity and openness and everything being recorded, and it being, in my case, more dangerous to take you out than to leave you be. And you want to be more dangerous dead than you are alive.
Yeah. So
And
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, I'm done.
I was going to say, you mentioned Mossad, like Mossad, the capabilities of Israeli intelligence are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Mind-boggling. Good for them, the powers that they've built. Great for the country of Israel. They killed someone in Dubai, where I am, many, many years ago. I'm sure you know the story, where they just walked into the hotel room, somehow unlocked it when it's locked from the inside, killed the person, went out, locked it again. John Kiriakou, I think it was John Kiriakou spoken about it. He said the CIA had no idea how they've done it, and they just left the country. Yeah. And they did that in a 5-star hotel out in the public. It's like when they want to take someone out, it's almost, and that's why you said what Candace Owens has done, putting a kill switch. Now, obviously, some people might do it for publicity. I'm not talking about Candace, but a lot of people like to do this for publicity. Others, I think it's, no harm in doing it, even it might get, a lot of attention, is that you want to make it worse for them to take you out than keep you alive. And for me, the good thing is that other people, exactly, like, for my thing, and I want to put a tweet saying it, but like maybe I'll just say it here, is that my X account, my team has access to it. My X account will always exist, probably get more attention if something happens to me. Now, there's no reason for anything happening to me, at least yet, so I'm not too worried. Candace goes out, she's got various theories, and she goes out against various organizations, goes out against Israel, the intelligence services. I try to be a lot more in the middle to try to really see all sides. So I'm not that extreme. But like I've faced a lot of threats, and I've had an investigation into me and Elon by the Brazilian government. I've had it Pakistan. I've got a lot of threats because I've been covering the Imran-Khan story. So it gets more and more concerning. And obviously, when you get to Tucker Carlson level, it gets really scary. Yeah. And it kind of leads to my next question: If you, a former CIA, knowing what you know, if you wanted to take out Epstein, if you were given the task and you accepted it, considering he's in the maximum security prison, how would you do it?
Easily, you get to the guards. You either plant, when you incarcerate Epstein in that block, you make sure that you penetrate, and one of the guards is working for you that has access to that cell 24/7. You do that. And then when the command is given, now granted, the camera was not, the camera on Epstein's cell, as we all know, was not working at the time. And the footage that we did see was not on Epstein's cell. It was on the guard sitting at the desk, and you could barely see the stairwell going up, as you know, I'm sure, going up into his cell, and somebody went up that stairwell. See, these people are so good, and they've got so many informants and so many penetrations. You just simply put someone as a security guard, and that's how it's done.
All right. And then if you look at let's say what happened to President Trump, the assassination attempt to President Trump, a lot of unanswered questions there, more than the Charlie Kirk assassination. The Charlie Kirk assassination, for me at least, and I've done a few panels, I've got another one in a few days, it looks like a lone gunman. I could be proven wrong, and I'm very open to be proven wrong. The Trump assassination, JFK is obviously on the one extreme. So you got Charlie on the side. I think it's a lone gunman. I think you disagree, and I'd love to get your thoughts. You got JFK. Obviously, the story is not what we know is not the truth. Trump's assassination attempt somewhere in the middle. Can you give me your thoughts on what happened in Butler, what you've seen, and all the unanswered questions there?
Yeah, we actually added a chapter at the last minute in Twilight of the Shadow Government on that. And after looking at all the available data that we could find, we came up with just a list of questions that have not been answered. This kid had encrypted 3 foreign encrypted accounts where he was communicating with someone, and we haven't found out who those accounts were connected to. The NSA can break that encryption easily. Who he was communicating with on these 3 foreign accounts. There hasn't been a scintilla of information that has come out about that. The security, the flaws in security, I think, sometimes these things are not black and white. Security was abysmal at that event. And I've trained presidential details around the world on executive protection. And the Secret Service just blew it, I think, because they had not put Trump as a priority on purpose. But the security was just horrific, allowing this kid to get up on the roof. But there's so many things about him that have been concealed. Why, once again, it's almost like Charlie Kirk. Why would this so-called normal kid all of a sudden snap, train himself on a high-powered rifle and go up and do the unthinkable, which is completely out of his character most of his adult life? Why would he do that? Now, in the case of Charlie Kirk, there's evidence that does not add up, but that's another story.
I'd love to hear that evidence. Like I've seen, so one of them is that where is the rifle? Like how did the rifle get onto the roof? One of them was, so they show photos of Tyler Robinson going up the stairs. We don't have a video yet because I think the investigation is ongoing. There's a court case, so they haven't released that evidence, at least not yet. Hopefully they will. If they don't, then there's more questions. Now, there's no rifle there. Now the official explanation is that the rifle's hidden under his pants and shirt, but we can't see it in the photos. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. So, sure. Yeah, and then later on, we see him jump off the roof immediately after taking the shot. He doesn't disassemble the rifles. Impossible to disassemble it quickly. We see him on video running immediately, and then he jumps off with his towel, and there's something under it, but it just doesn't look like a rifle. Very pixelated. From it, all the evidence you've seen. What are the unanswered questions that you have?
There are several, and the FBI's silence is just making it worse. Allegedly, Charlie was shot by a 30-06. Now, I'm a weapons expert, and I trained and carried several weapon systems, especially when overseas. Anybody that has ever shot a 30-06, that thing will go into a lamppost and out the other side. Any hunter that uses it knows that it'll go through a thick deer and blast open on the other side in an exit wound. A 30-06, and I don't want to be graphic, a 30-06 would take someone's head off, not just poke a little hole or a hole where, big enough for blood to come out like it did. A 30-06 would not do that. And it's sad that some of this comes out, but the claim that, well, the 30-06 round hit Charlie's spine and it stopped the bullet, it was a miracle. Come on. 30-06 would not be stopped by a human spine. There are weapons experts out there that have put big sides of beef with cow spines up there in a 30-06, and it just blasted the thing away. I don't think it was a 30-06. I think it was a single shooter. I agree with you there, but it didn't come from the front. It came from his right rear. And that was an exit wound that we saw that severed his carotid artery. Now, so they provide us with a film of Tyler Robinson leaving the scene of the shooting, allegedly jumping off the roof, and all he has is a coat, a sweater, kind of flapping in the wind. There's no gun there. The shots where he was seen before the so-called assassination, a 30-06, number one, you can't just break it down. You got to take out the screws and break the whole thing apart. And you can't walk normally when you got a long gun like a 30-06 down your pants. You look at the videos and the pictures, it's not there. After the shooting, after he hops down off the roof with no gun, with either his backpack or his coat, clearly there was no gun. He's walking along and into traffic. And it's funny because the camera pans him. It's focused on the parking lot right there. But when he starts walking, the camera starts following him, which was interesting in and of itself. But he has no gun down his pants. He has no gun in his hand. And then they're claiming that, well, after he made the shot, he dismantled this 30-06, got it into the woods, reconstructed the 30-06 with his little screwdriver and left it there. No. It's the evidence actually is to the contrary. There was no 30-06 in his hand before or after the shooting. We got a real problem with that.
So I had Matt Tardio, who's also a weapons expert as well, worked in the Marines, and we were having that conversation, that debate, and he talked about that, gunshot wounds, we need to see the cartridge because gunshot wounds sometimes do weird things. The entry wound and the exit wound just enters from there, exits from somewhere else, and he's seen all these weird things happen before. And then if we don't see the actual rounds, we will not be able to explain why there's no exit wound. I'm not an expert like you guys, and he talks about potentially the cartridge was engraved. That had engraving on it. That could have weakened the cartridge, for example, or that might have led it not to come out of the other side. You think all these theories don't make sense? Like there is no logical explanation for there not to be an exit wound. with a 30-06.
Yeah. Let me tell you, it's one of the most powerful long guns in the world that just doesn't come out a little hole. It just doesn't do that. Any weapons expert will tell you that knows anything about long guns and 30-06s, that was not a 30-06 shot. The damage it would have done would have been horrendous. Not only the fact that there is video of him before the shooting with no rifle and after the shooting jumping off the roof with no rifle. So that is evidence. Now, they put that out there thinking that that would placate the public, as they always do, but it didn't. It just revealed the fact that this guy did not have a 30-06 based on the footage that they released. Now, coming where I come from and having seen so many fabrications of single assassins and other things, which is a CIA favorite, always a single boogeyman, something's not adding up. And I want to see the bullet. Where's the bullet? Well, it bounced off his spine and lodged just under the skin. I hate to laugh, but 30-06 rounds don't do that. But anyway, let's say it did. Let's see the bullet. Let's match the bullet with the gun. Let's see, as a criminal investigator, let's do like they should have done with 9/11. Let's do an actual, authentic criminal investigation of this and look at each pieces of these data that the American public, people, and weapons experts are bringing out and showing everybody that apparently the FBI missed, which is doubtful. But people are now demanding, okay, I'm not buying this. Let me just put it that way, based on the evidence, even the evidence that they provide, I am not buying it.
What's your theory? I know we're just speculating here, but what makes more sense to you?
Well, motive, method, and opportunity in a crime. Who had the motive to take out Charlie Kirk in such a surgical fashion? Now, again, this is just me. Looking at all the facts. I looked at his speeches before the event happened. Charlie had just come out, and he made a pretty dramatic statement on the PBD broadcast, saying, questioning October the 7th. Now, I'm not doing that, but Charlie said, and he's right, I've been to Israel multiple times. I've been there 4 times. The IDF is all along that border where October the 7th happened, and that night they were gone. They weren't there. Why? Was security lifted by the government as a pretext? He just asked that question. But asking that question put the entire Israeli government in an uproar, not to mention Mossad agents who will kill you before they'll look at you. And then he'd come out a couple of other times stating that he was no longer supporting Israel and what they were doing in Gaza any longer. He started questioning AIPAC and other things like that. And then just a month later, he's surgically taken out. Now, who's got the motive? Because Israel and AIPAC were starting to take heat from all over the U.S. public, and even Marjorie Taylor Greene and others in Congress are starting to question the power that the Israeli government has over our government, and starting to press for Israel to be held accountable, and the funding that we've been giving them not to just be given, them manipulating Congress, and which is all true. But Charlie had just come out and started discussing those things. And then just no more than a month later, Charlie is taken out. Motive? There's your motive. Method? They can do it. Opportunity? Charlie was sitting essentially in a fishbowl. He had a security detail around him, which you and I have alluded to earlier, is not going to stop an intelligence agency from taking you out. It's just going to ID you by the people that are around you. But they had the motive. They had the method to do it, sophisticated firearms techniques, and they had the opportunity. Charlie was sitting right out there in the open. That's just my opinion.
I'll tell you why, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It's like, I'll tell you why I just think that it just wouldn't make sense for the Mossad to be behind this or Israel to be behind this. Why would the CIA allow this, number one? And number two, why would they target someone? There's a lot of people that are anti-Israel, a lot more vocal than Charlie. Charlie was hinting that he might... what he said 2 days ago, I think 2 days before he was killed, leaving no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. That was just a message. Maybe he was just letting out some steam, but that's very different to, leaving the Israel cause versus someone like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. You've got, Tucker's much bigger mic, who are a lot more vocal, and that's all they do is kind of criticize U.S. foreign aid to Israel. And again, disclaimer, I was with Anna Kasparian yesterday, always put a disclaimer. These people don't hate Jews. They're critical of Israel. Any person that loves their country, want their country to do well, their country to have universal health insurance, and not another country they're giving aid to, but putting that and not spending trillions of dollars on foreign wars, putting all that aside, because I'm very critical of the amount of influence Israel has on the US. I'm not even American, but when I see the world's biggest democracy get into so much debt, my country, Australia, is a democracy and ally to the US, will suffer if the US falls.
Yeah.
But putting all that aside, the reason I think it doesn't make sense for Israel is Charlie Kirk was a friend of Trump. You're killing the friend of a president and people around the president, a friend of MAGA, a friend of many members of Congress, and yeah. So if you put these all together, and if it backfires on Israel, if it leaks that Israel was behind it, it will destroy U.S.-Israeli relations. It's just such a big risk relative to the reward that they get, that they're killing someone that might turn on them, or they might be less supportive, not be critical, but just less supportive. This is why I just think, I understand that these messages are sus, and Candace Owens keeps releasing information that still surprises me. I didn't expect those messages to come out. And maybe you could kind of counter my point here, is that would the CIA be complicit in something like this, especially considering Charlie Kirk's being an American citizen, number one, and number two is isn't there red lines for any foreign intelligence? Wouldn't there be a red line for the CIA? Hey, you could do anything you want to anyone, but not to an American citizen, and not to someone who's friends with the president.
There is no red line for the CIA. We'll start there. Secondly, you've got Mossad agents, I'm sure, that were incensed at Charlie Kirk, and I'm not saying it's so, but Charlie Kirk intimation that the Israel government may have been involved in October 7th. And you've got a Mossad agent that has the ability and the means that is incensed by that and wants him gone. That certainly could happen. Now, let's remember, too, that Charlie, and I admired him for this, Charlie came out and did a full panel on Epstein, the whole shebang, and brought Tucker Carlson in on that and discussed the Epstein case and the fact that it was being covered up and it was being hidden, to the point where President Trump himself called Charlie and told him to back off and drop it, and Charlie did. So that's just another piece in this whole puzzle as to why someone with the marksmanship ability would want Charlie taken out in such a sophisticated manner. So he had made some enemies. Now, would the CIA do this? I don't think the CIA was involved, although there's no red line with the CIA. They would do it. I didn't see Charlie as a threat to the CIA. Now, remember, please, the CIA and Mossad, and I worked with Mossad when I went over there with the deputy director to Israel. Mossad and the CIA, in many cases, are joined at the hip, like brother and sister in intelligence and in operations. But they're also enemies. Some of my biggest espionage cases were attempted Israeli penetrations of the CIA. But Mossad and the CIA work together on a lot of very deep cover operations.
Do you think that that Mossad? Look, one question that I still struggle to answer is how much influence Israel has over the US. Now, my explanation is, and I see you jumping in already, so you have a lot to say on that. So the way I look at it, from what I understand so far, and I'm still learning as I go, is that obviously a lot of influential people and wealthy people in the US that are of Jewish heritage, and Jews just want their country of their own, especially after the massacres of World War II, the genocide of World War II, and so that they have a connection to Israel. So even though they're American citizens, they also want their homeland to do well and to kind of destroy the threats around them. So that's a logical explanation. They're American citizens. Now, I still think they should, I think anyone that is donating money should have whatever cause they're fighting for should be a cause that's focused on America first. Guns, no guns. Healthcare, no healthcare, but should be focused on America first. What you think is best for the US, not Israel. But that's not how the system works at the moment. So that's my understanding. Now, and obviously the lobbying groups, how well organized they are, it's been incredible. And what Israel's done over the last few decades is great for them. They've done really well. Look how they're the strongest military in the Middle East, while the US is heavily in debt. But the question I have for you, Kevin, is a lot of people are worried, and Epstein is used as one example, that the Mossad has a lot of information and on people of power in the US and are actively blackmailing people in power in the US. Now, I struggle to believe this because we're talking about the United States of America, the strongest military in the world, the strongest economy in the world, the strongest intelligence in the world. You don't blackmail the US. You could, fight the US. You could trick the US. You could trick them into a war in Afghanistan and weaken the US. You can spread them thin across Ukraine and the Middle East and South China Sea and drag them into all these different wars. But you cannot blackmail America or American politicians or American the director of the CIA or the FBI. Am I too naive?
Sure, you can. Of course, you can. And I've been a big supporter of Israel for years, and I've been there 4 times. As a matter of fact, I went there when I was a CIA officer on official duties, and the CIA and Israel and Mossad were very close. I was there. But the issue is, would the Mossad blackmail somebody in the United States? The answer to that question is yes, they would, as the CIA would blackmail some other political figure in this country or another one. And I just tweeted this out 4 days ago. People need to understand there's something called the Masada complex, been part of Israel's doctrine since its inception. Now, Masada was a group of Jewish resistors that withheld the Romans up on the top of this flat mountain and kind of made themselves a little fortress there with the Roman soldiers encamped around them. And it was certain death for them to resist that. And they all hunkered down. And as the Roman soldiers came up to Masada, they all died as martyrs and heroes. Well, part of Israel's doctrine is the Masada complex, where they will defend and protect Israel, even to Israel's own demise, whatever it takes. That's how Israel thinks. That's how Mossad thinks. So they will do anything to protect Israel and its safety because of what they've been through, obviously, the Holocaust and all these horrible things. Israel will do anything. And Mossad, we think the CIA has no morals. Even the CIA has some constraints. Mossad has no constraints. So we can't, as human beings, we want to believe the best, and sometimes that can be a weakness or a mistake. I mean, it's a good trait, but it can be a mistake. That Israel will do anything. They will blackmail anyone they have to, including a U.S. politician, for the support of Israel.
How do you compare the relationship between U.S. intelligence and, let's say, Mossad compared to, let's say, the FSB of Russia or Chinese intelligence or Saudi intelligence? Which one is a bigger threat to the U.S. in your opinion? Which one's more powerful? And more importantly, the question I want to ask is, we're talking about having ethics at the CIA, but I want to, a counter argument to that. Wouldn't ethics make the CIA weaker? You talked about the Mossad has less ethics than the CIA. Maybe isn't that why the Mossad is scarier to some than the CIA, than most other intelligence, maybe second to the CIA? Sure. So then if based on that argument, for the protection of the United States, if other intelligence services also don't have Russia, China, Saudi, all these different countries, Russia, China, rivals to the US, don't have ethics, wouldn't ethics of the CIA make the US weaker?
No, not necessarily. I did operations where I lied and I stole, and I actually got an award for collecting human intelligence for the sake of my country. Now, I'm a person of faith, and empirically, that's unethical. In that case, I was doing in the defense of democracy. So ethics, they're bendable in some cases. I'm not saying that that's a perfect world, but they are. Now, in terms of intelligence threats, number one is China. Number one, and it has been for 30 years. I had espionage cases when I was in the counter-espionage group. China was all over us, all over our business, our industry. They are the number one intelligence threat to us, to the CIA, to our national security, no doubt. And
how powerful are they?
They are extremely powerful. Their technology in terms of intelligence, they have agents all through the United States. The only reason that they haven't moved on the U.S. now is to do so would result in the devastation of their own economy. So they're trying to do it slowly with the BRICS and other things. And
move on the U.S. as in what exactly? Weaken the U.S. through different means?
Weaken the U.S. dollar. With the BRICS, they're abandoning the U.S. dollar as the petro and world reserve currency, which will drive the dollar to slow destruction. That's another issue, but that's China. Then comes Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the CIA are once again like a brother and a sister. Saudi intelligence is hooked at the hip with the Central Intelligence Agency.
We saw that during the Iran-Contra days.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, they're essentially brother and sister. So in terms of them being a threat to the CIA, they're more of an asset to the CIA than a threat. Mossad, we were frenemies. The CIA and Mossad are frenemies. They're friends because of the volatility of the Middle East, and Israel is the only major player that the U.S. has in the Middle East for any kind of stability, of which there has been none. But Israel is our key ally in that volatile part of the world, both in terms of defense and intelligence. So, but Israel will do anything that it can for its own self-promotion and preservation, and that includes, and I know this personally, trying to penetrate the CIA and trying to commit espionage against the CIA.
Why would you do that to a friend of yours, an ally of yours? I've learned it happens very often between allies, a lot more often than people would expect. But like, wouldn't you jeopardize the US is your biggest funder, your protectors, offered you all the weapons, offered you that ability to do what you did in the West Bank and Gaza, to defend against Iran, to defend against Hezbollah. Wouldn't you not bite the hand that feeds you?
Sure. If you thought it would expand your self-preservation, yeah, they would. Of course it would. Yes, that's how intelligence works. You got to understand, this is a dark art. Intelligence is a dark art. If we try to think of it from moral or even intellectual standards, this is a dark art that has ends that justify its means. So Israel will do anything it can to ensure that the United States does what it wants. Anything, including blackmailing politicians and trying to penetrate and get inside the CIA, which I witnessed personally. So, no, they would do it. Yes, they would do it to preserve Israel, to promote Israel, to make sure that the money keeps flowing in there. And there are congressmen and senators that politically and financially are in Israel's pockets. So they pulled it off.
And last question on the various intelligence services is the FSB, Russian intelligence. Obviously, they were pretty scary back in the 80s and 90s, KGB days. How are they now?
They're the same. They have not changed one bit. They're the same as they were under the Soviet Union. They're just as ruthless. They're just as expansive. And they're just as hostile to the United States. They're not as much of a threat because they're not as well funded and global reaching as they used to be. But they still are a threat, but not just as much as China is specifically. And China has got us, and China has built backdoors even into our power grid, some of our power grid systems. So China has us in terms of intelligence operations, essentially.
Do we have China? Does the US have China as well?
No. Not like that, we don't. No. China's an art. So the US is so porous. And our institutes of higher learning and education and science organizations and companies and corporations were so porous to people coming in and getting inside this country. It was easy for China to do this to us. China is a walled-in country, so sure, the CIA tries to get in there, and I'm not going to say what sort of success they've had, but nothing at all like China has had in the porous United States.
And what do they have? Like, I think Russians call it compromise. They're really good at having compromising material on different people.
Compromat, yeah.
Is that, yeah, exactly. So is that a common strategy for various intelligence services? Like, is that one of the most common strategies? If you want to take someone down, get access to their messages, their cameras. Wow. Okay. Number one is just getting access to. So that would be the way, if you want to take someone down and not kill them, the best way is just to destroy their reputation.
Yeah.
Is to try to get compromising material. There's a famous journalist, I won't mention his name, but most people probably know the story. I was telling my team about it, that they just got a sex tape released on him. He's very critical of, I think, the US intelligence and US foreign policy. And you probably know the story. And him and his husband, they had I think a sex tape released on them, and he had to do a tweet about it.
I just shook my head.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a typical strategy if it was intelligence.
Yeah, and they will plant things on people's computers and come up with internet IP connections and other things to make it look like that person was doing it.
Okay, so how do I, sorry, another selfish question, but how do I, so one thing I don't do now, and this is, I'm sure others listening to this would probably want to know this, is like, I try not to be in a private place with another, woman or even person when there's no cameras or anything, because I know that's a common strategy to kind of fabricate a story. But what about planting things in one's computer? How can one prevent that? Oh, there's nothing you could do, like change your phone and laptop. Like, I already live, and Tucker Carlson said it himself, I live with the fact that, and I'm sure the NSA has, and other forms of intelligence that can access people's phones, Mossad, etc. So I live with the fact that everything I say on the phone is potentially recorded, and I have to accept that fact. Yeah. Okay. What else could one do then? Is there anything one could do to at least avoid that, to have some sort of privacy?
Well, it's starting simply, get yourself a Mac computer and get rid of any sort of Microsoft Windows operating service, for starters. That is so penetrated, it's ridiculous. Now, your phone is one of the greatest eavesdropping devices ever invented, that listens to you even when it's off at will. And if you're going to say anything in private or go anywhere in private, do not take your phone with you, even if it's off.
Does it? How about a Faraday cage box?
Well, you can there are some Faraday cages and some Faraday sleeves that I've seen tested that work. You can put it in there, but you're going to have to take it out eventually. The minute you take that thing out of the bag, geolocating is going to know where you are. Immediately.
This is crazy.
Immediately.
This is crazy. Yeah, I had an opportunity once to interview someone who was on a hit list. Would be a very controversial interview, but I interview everyone, and I'm very open-minded. And I was recommended by someone very influential who's connected to like married. This is the one interview I tell you not to do because they could easily track you and they could use you. They don't care if they kill you as collateral damage to get the person that they're aiming for. That was a while ago. And that person's, by the way, dead. No joke. He's died a few months ago. He was taken out. First, Kevin, it's just been absolute pleasure speaking to you. I'm 100% going to speak to you again as there's issues that you could comment on. I love how genuine and open you were. One last thing I want to bring up is you mentioned it earlier and it's eating me up, and maybe we can cut it out if you want, but you mentioned, and sorry to bring it up again, but your son is missing. Sorry for bringing it up, but how long has it been? What do you know about it?
Well, he threatened to commit suicide several times and then disappeared. I understand that he's alive. You just don't know where he is. And you talk about collateral damage. Let me tell you, and this is why I do it. They will go after your family. If that's your weakness, whatever your weakness is, they'll go after it. You could imagine the agony of a father to see that happen to his oldest son and my best friend. But I've learned not to let them get to me that way. So I handle it in prayer. I handle it by trying any way I can to find him and help him. And I make sure that I don't let it get to me to the point where I no longer become effective, which I think is the goal. So a lot of people are praying for Joey. Please keep doing that. I still believe, in prayer, and I'm not being simple, but I have to acknowledge the fact I may never see him again.
How long has it been since you've seen him?
I haven't seen him for, 3 years.
All right, Kevin, prayers to hopefully you reunite with your son.
Thank you.
Is that related to what happened at that house, the chemicals that impacted his health?
Yes, it is. He snuck out on that base and went into buildings he shouldn't have gone into. He told me this later, and he signed no CIA secrecy agreement. So he was openly talking about it. His mail was opened. He was broken into. He was followed, and eventually he just snapped. And I blame the CIA for that. And I think all the indicators point in that direction.
Well, if there's anything anyone could do, they could message your X account. Your DMs, I'm sure, are your DMs open on X? You can go into settings where anyone can message you.
Yes, I leave my DMs open on X, and that's how I get some of my interviews because I'm pretty closed everywhere else. They can go into my X account, and I put most of the information I'm revealing on my X account. Thanks to James Musk and Bobby Kennedy Jr., they have, whoever was doing it, they've been told to leave me alone now.
Just one last thing is your son's health. Sorry, last question. Based on what happened, the lacing of the chemicals, did that impact? So is that still having an impact on his health today, or that's been kind of reversed?
Yeah,
on his immune system.
Towards the end there, he couldn't hold down a job because he was sick all the time. Yeah.
Well, if there's anyone that could help you there as well, that's listening to this, please DM Kevin on X. Kevin, your story is heartbreaking, and what you've done for the country is admirable. And I appreciate you for speaking. Anything I could do to help, happy to. Thank you, sir.
And thank you for what you're doing. I really admire how you do it, and I'm just glad you're out there.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.